Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, aka Mr. Everything, coming back at you with some more Harn content. Okay, so as you know, what I'm doing is I'm doing a series of Harn videos in preparation for running a campaign of Harn for my players, and these videos do two things. They help you understand what Harn is, but it also helps me understand better. It allows me to do a little research about the topic that I want to discuss, and then so I am learning at the same time that I'm helping you guys out understanding Harn. Okay, so I'm going to be running a game in the Harn world, right? Using the Harnmaster role-playing game. I have Harnmaster up here, and we're going to take a look. Today's video is going to be about healing, healing injuries or wounds. Now, I didn't pull up Roll20 because I don't think it's necessary to talk about healing. We're just going to look at two books. Primarily, we're going to be looking at the Harnmaster role-playing game, the main core book, but we're third edition. But we're also going to be looking at Harnmaster Religion. So Harnmaster Religion is where you're going to find your clerical rituals that, and I say rituals because they're not spells, as opposed to a wizard would cast a spell. And there's a comment in, I think it's in might be in the core rulebook, where it says a wizard is offended when you say what he did was miraculous, and then clerics are if you ask them to cast a spell, they believe you're a blasphemer. So clerics and wizards don't get along apparently, but yeah, wizards cast spells, clerics perform rituals. Okay, but let's talk about the physician because I really need to talk about that. Okay, in a general overview of healing, of wounds and healing, let's compare it to D&D, right? As you all know, I do a lot of comparing to D&D to help people kind of grasp what the main differences are between Harn and D&D 5th edition, even though I talk about RuneQuest and chivalry and sorcery and things like that from time to time. But D&D has hit points, which is a numerical number assigned to your character that lets you know how many points of damage that your character or a monster can take before he is defeated. Harn does not have hit points. It has injuries, injury levels. Okay, so when a D&D character is hit by a weapon, you roll dice, and that's how many points of damage you take, and you mark those off of your hit points. You might have more or less hit points based on magical spells that are cast upon you, or whatever. And there's now once you've lost a number of hit points in D&D. Well, if I say hit points, it's obviously D&D because Harn has no hit points. But when you take a number of points of damage, you have a number of ways that you can heal your hit points. The first way is to rest. You can rest for 1 hour and theoretically get all of your hit points back. You have a number of hit dice, right? And it usually equates to 1 per your character level. So if you're a 5th level fighter, and so you would have 5 hit dice. And so when you take a rest for 1 hour, you can roll one die at a time, plus your constitution, to regain hit points, to heal hit points. And then if you feel like that one's not enough, you can roll again, and you can roll again, and you can roll again until you get as many hit dice that you want to spend up to your max after that 1 hour. Okay, now those are expended, so you don't get those back until you perform a long rest. Okay, so that is considered a short rest, right? So theoretically, I'm just gonna say I'm a 5th level fighter, and I've got 50 hit points because I rolled really good, and I get hit, boom, 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 and it brought me down to 10 hit points, but I survived. So I need 40 hit points. I roll 1 hit die, I roll 2 hit die, I roll 3 hit die. After about 4 hit dice, maybe hypothetically, or 5, I get all my hit points back. So a D&D fighter can heal all of his hit points back in 1 hour. Another way he could get his hit points back would be with a magical potion, right? You can just drink a potion and it gives you a number of dice of hit points back. Just boom, you just done, right? Instant, pow. Another way is a cleric or anybody that has a healing spell can use a ranged healing spell on you, like Healing Word or something, or they could touch you with like Cure Wounds or something like that, where they can come up and touch you, and they would expend one of their many spell slots, and you would get a number of dice back. Okay, number of hit points back based on a die roll. Another way, specifically, a fighter can get hit points back is by just sucking it up and taking a second wind, right? He can just will his hit points back. Okay, so those are just some of the ways. Oh, last way, long rest. So you spend 8 hours in activity. Usually it's overnight. You can do this once a day. It's like an overnight sleep, like in a campsite or whatever. And you get all of your hit points back. No matter how many you lost, you get them all back. Plus you get half of your hit dice back. So if you expended those 4 as in earlier, you would get 2 of them back. So now instead of you only having 1 left, now you've got 3. Okay, and then on the next long rest, you get the next 2 back. And so you would be, after 2 long rests, you're guaranteed to have all of your hit dice back. And you would have had all of your hit points back after the first long rest. Okay. So you can see how easy it is for a character to stay alive, basically. You go into, I'm just going to throw a scenario out. You go into a dungeon. Okay, and I'm gonna compare this to Harn in just a moment, because that's really what this video is all about. But let's say in D&D, you go into a dungeon. Your first room is a couple of goblins, and they do like 10 points of damage to you, and you dispatch them. That's fine. Then you move into the next room, and maybe there's a couple more goblins, and they do another 10 points of damage. And you and your party decide, since you're at about 50% hit points, it would be good to take a short rest. So you guys plop your butt on the ground, you sit there for about an hour, you roll a hit die or 2, and you get all of your hit points back. Now you're back up to full strength. You go into the next room, a couple more goblins, another 10 hit points. Go into the next room, a couple more goblins, another 10 hit points. You decide you're going to take another short rest. You take another short rest and you get all of your hit points back. Okay. And then you go into a room, you fight a couple of orcs. Maybe they do 40 points of damage. You don't have any hit dice left because you've used them all in short rests. So you and your party decide to do a long rest. And then as long as it's only once per day, you go ahead and take a long rest and get all your hit points back. Day 2, full strength, and you're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so let's talk about Harn for a moment. Harn doesn't have hit points. It has injuries. And then each injury has a severity level associated to it. And we'll get into it. I'm going to break it down in the rule book here in just a second. But I'm just giving you a general summary. Harn has injury severity levels, and from 1 to whatever, 6. 6 is pretty bad. But let's just say you've got a couple of serious wounds and they're at level 2, right? That basically means, and they kind of give you a description, that's a big cut. That's like a cut that's got like a 6-inch gash, and it's 2 to 3 inches deep. So you can visualize what that injury is, and it tells you exactly where it is. It's in the thigh, it's in the groin, it's in your abdomen, your chest, your neck, whatever. So you have a really good idea of where that injury is. Okay, so those injuries don't heal overnight. I mean, think about it, man. If I had a 6-inch cut on my neck, 2 to 3 inches deep, first of all, my neck would be, I'd probably be dead. But hypothetically, let's got a chest wound or something, and it's just a massive gash. I don't just take a deep breath. Oh, I get all my hit points back. No, you don't heal instantly. It doesn't happen. I would be suffering. And plus, first of all, injuries do give you minuses to everything you do. It's basically anything physical. Mental, not so much, but your physical, you get penalties for having injuries. And so, which is another thing, in D&D, you could be at 1 hit point and have no penalties. But so I'm suffering from this wound, and it has to be treated. Usually, it has to be treated within a certain amount of time. I think it's 4 hours, I think. But if it's not treated, then there's a potential that it becomes infected, right? And then, where did all this come from, right? So you could have an infected wound, yes. And then, well, let's say I treat it, like I apply a bandage or something like that on my wound, or I have a friend apply a bandage because maybe he's skilled at it and I'm not. So now that it's treated, depending on the type of wound, it won't become infected. Okay, and then once a wound is treated, it gets what's called a healing rate. But we won't get into all that until I open the book and we actually look at the rules, because I don't want to misspeak. But what I'm trying to get at is the healing rate is a multiplier to a die roll that you get to make once every 5 days. So you make that roll at the end of 5 days. Your S2, remember, serious gash on the chest at rank 2, would now go to rank 1. But it's still there, right? You still have an injury. It's rank 1. And that was only if you only get to make that roll if you're convalescing. So if I'm moving around and being active, that doesn't get healed at all. right? So if I go into that one first room with a couple of goblins, if one of them hits me for an S2, now I'm sucking. I bind my wounds. I go into the next room. I still have that S2. I say S as in serious 2, right? So I have that wound and it doesn't go away. Now, I would have to leave the dungeon, go back to someplace safe where I can lay in a bed for 5 days for that wound to go down 1 level. I'd have to spend another 5 days for it to go down 2 levels. In general. Okay, now we're going to talk about physicians and clerics and magic potions as well. But in general, I don't just get to do a short rest or a long rest. That long rest is 5 days. And that short rest is 5 days. Now, there is a possibility that you can roll good enough, and instead of it healing 1 level, it actually, if you get critical success, I think it heals 2 levels or something. And there are also some wounds that once they're treated, they're immediately removed. So we'll get into all that. But in general, like in what was it, last night's video where I had a combat where I had Tim and Jim fighting it out, and Tim was not having a good day, and Tim received 5 wounds. Right, he had a foot wound for 2, and then he had a neck wound for 3. So he's sitting at 5. Now, each wound can heal separately, right? So you could actually get one of these wounds and one of these off, but I would still be sucking after the first 5 days. So, but either way, it's not an in-dungeon kind of healing. You can't heal naturally that fast. Now, magically, now that's a little different, and we will talk about that. All right, so let's go ahead and jump to healing. All right, so we're here under physician, page 1, and it talks about basically everything I just mentioned. But yeah, the clerics of peony are more life, longevity, healing, protections, that kind of cleric, where a cleric of I don't know, agrics or something like that, I think they're more like death and destruction kind of clerics. But we'll get into that when I get into the video on religions, and you'll learn a lot more about the different types of clerics. And we're going to look a little bit of that in today's video. I'm going to talk about the convocations, or maybe not, yeah, the ritual convocations. We'll talk about those here in a minute. And it shows about fees right here, typically range from 3 silver for a fairly basic first aid to £1 for major surgery. Medicines provided by the Apothecaries Guild and hospital care can double or triple the fees. I mean, there's not a whole lot of hospitals laying around. A peony temple would have an infirmary because that's kind of that's their bag. All right. Okay, injury recovery. Now you notice any rule that has a little box beside it like this is an optional rule. So it's one that you use or you don't use. There's blood loss from bleeding. There's you can bleed to death, right? Which is a good rule to use, I think. And then there's diagnosis, which is before a physician can treat you, he has to make a diagnosis roll. I don't think that's, personally, I don't want to use that optional rule, because I think part of the treatment of the physician is rolled into the skill diagnosis. So if he's already making a skill roll to treat you, I think it's part of that roll was his diagnosis. So unless you just want to make him roll twice, diagnosis and then treatment, I don't want to do that. All right, and so then there's the treatment roll, right? There's a treatment table, which we'll get into in a moment, but the treatment table basically tells me what type of treatment is needed for that specific type of injury. Like, does it need a bandage? Does it need to be cleaned with water? Does it need surgery, cauterization, or what? Right? It goes into all that. Okay. And NT means there's no treatment, or maybe it means there's no treatment needed. Okay. Minor wounds usually heal by themselves, but serious and grievous wounds may cause permanent impairment or death if untreated. Okay. Treatment roll tests the physician's effective mastery level, which is EML is basically all your ML is the skill number. It's the percentage roll that you always have to make of the treater. Okay, right, the physician himself. Plus, if there's an EML modifier, then you would add that because more serious wounds might be harder to treat. Plus, okay, treatment rules can be delayed, but if postponed more than 24 hours, then reduce it by 5 per day. Yeah, what does this say? It normally, I thought it was 4 hours, but this says 24 hours. Okay, so basically you have 24 hours to get treated with no minus, and then it's -5 per day after that to the treatment roll, right? And then healing, once treated, remember it has to be treated first. Once treated, the injury has a healing rate generated by the treatment table, right? A character receives 1 healing roll every 5 days of the wound to reduce the injury. When all injury levels are eliminated for a specific wound, it's healed. So if you got 10 wounds, well, you probably wouldn't because you wouldn't be alive, but if you had 10, you could roll on each one to reduce them. Okay, so here's the treatment table. Depending on the type of injury, right here, and it's broken down. Okay, ignore this bleeder, bruise, fracture, and crush, right? Ignore that. And let's jump up here to where it says minor cut, serious cut, or grievous cut. So you got minor, serious, grievous, and mortal. Mortal's another one. But you could assume that mortal is also grievous, so you could just apply it to the grievous. And then there's cuts, stabs, or bite, or tear. There's burns, and there's frost. There should be. Okay, there's crush, fracture, and bruise. Okay, so these must be, and I'm learning, see as we go. These must be the blunt. I was wondering where the blunt ones were because this is edge and this is piercing, and then this is frost fire. So this must be minor blunt, serious blunt, and grievous blunt. That's probably what it is. Well, that's the way I'm going to work it. Okay, and then it has a description of what that is. So remember, my friend Tim had a serious 3 on his neck, right? So that was a serious, obviously. And so that's a cut. or gash, 2 to 6 inches long. Okay, no big deal. He just had this big, huge cut on his neck. What's required? Well, surgery is required. Okay, so someone's going to have to get down there and actually stitch you up, right? And then you have an EML modifier plus 20. So that means it's easier than a grievous cut, right? Because a grievous is plus 10, but a serious is plus 20, and a minor is plus 30. So it's 10, 20, 30, usually. Okay? Yeah, except for stabs. Those are 5, 15, and 25. Okay, so he makes his skill roll. Depending, okay, NT means if you have no treatment, like you decided, screw it, I'm going to let it heal on its own, right? If there's no treatment, then it, like a serious cut, would be H4. Okay, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. That's explained down here, but I will explain it here. Now, if I decide to get treatment, or if I treat it myself, and I roll my physician skill, the critical failure, marginal success, critical success. So this serious cut, I got a really good physician. He rolls, he adds 20 to his roll, and he gets critical success. Well, actually 20 to his skill, making it 20 easier. Okay, and then he gets a critical success. Well, it becomes H6. Okay, you can see that a more skilled result becomes a higher number, right? And you would say, what the hell? Why is H6 better than an H3? Well, here I'll explain. Okay, so that's your healing rate. That is what you multiply your, okay, you test your HR times endurance. So if your H is H6 and your endurance is 10, then your healing rate is 60, right? Because it's 6 times 10. If you had an 11 endurance and an H6, then it would be 66. It's obvious math, right? And then you have to roll that or less to do a recovery. And then right here, we're going to look healing table. Once per 5 days for each wound, right? And let's say I get a marginal success, I heal the injury level by 1. If I get a critical success, it reduces the injury level by 2. So that healing, that wound that I had that was 3 levels, would, even with the critical success, I still have a 1 remaining, right? Okay. And that's after 5 days. And then after the next 5 days, I roll. But remember, I'm trying to get a 60. That's not a very high number, right? So, I mean, it's not bad, but it's pretty low. It's 60. If it was 70 or 80, it might be a little bit better, but 60 kind of sucks. So, I need a better endurance, right? You need a good endurance. You need a good endurance to be able to heal. And how is endurance? That's strength, stamina, and willpower, right? Okay. Now, if you get a result over here that says double E, EE, then the injury heals in 1 day. No healing rules are required. So that's like an automatic cure, right? And those are almost always minors that you get a critical success on the treatment, except for frost. you can get a double E, and all you have to do is warm him up. Okay. Grievous frost. Amputate. Yeah. That's your treatment. And no treatment, nothing happens. You must have it treated. Bleeder, you need a tourniquet. Okay, that's no problem. And then bruises, and these basically give you the numbers. Now, if there is an asterisk up here on this table, then there's a chance there's a permanent injury. Right here. Healing rate, as indicated. Okay, if there's an asterisk is listed, the victim will have a permanent 1d3 reduction of an attribute. Okay, so like permanent, like his elbow is never the same or whatever. So the dungeon master, game master, Harnmaster, whatever you call them in this game, game master, I believe. You just have to decide, or you make a logical decision on what attribute. And so, like, if I get hit in the neck, and let's say I had a grievous cut in my neck, required surgery, and then I have a healing rate right here. It says there's a chance for a permanent injury. Now, you notice there's no permanent injury if the treatment is critical success. But if it's not critical success, then there's a permanent injury. And then I would have to decide, as the game master, what attribute that would affect. Would it affect his stamina? Would it affect his comeliness? Like, what if he had a big cut across his face? Would it affect his agility? Probably not, but it might, because, it just depends. And the dungeon master can say, I'm going to have it affect your XYZ. And then you roll a d3 and you immediately reduce that attribute. The attribute is like it's dex, agility, comeliness, eyesight, hearing, or whatever. Or stamina. Reduce the derived SBs. Okay, so any skill that has that stat in it would also be reduced, possibly. You just have to refigure it out because it's an average. And then now any skill that had that SB automatically is reduced by 5 times the SB reduction. So if it was reduced by 1, because, okay, think of it like this. I have a 10, a 10, and a 10 in one of my SBs, skill base. And one of those 3, let's say stamina or whatever, is reduced. And I rolled a die and it reduced it to 7. Right? Okay. So now my SB total is now 10, 10, and 7, or 27, which would be the average would be 9. Right? So my SB would become 9. Now the reduction was 1 from 10 to 9. So then I have to reduce the skill by 5. I don't see how it could be anything more than just 5, right? Because it's 1d3 reduction of an attribute. So if I reduced it by 1, that wouldn't reduce my SB. The stat would just go down by 1. But depending on what the averages were, right? Okay. Okay, and then it tells you like how long it takes to do surgery, how long it takes to splint, compression, clean and dress. You need water, like some of these need clean and dress. And then, okay, great. Now, infection. Test HR and endurance once per day for each infected injury. Okay, so if a wound is infected, and we'll talk about that over here, but if it's infected, you have to make that HR not just to heal at the end of the week, but every day along that, you have to make an HR times endurance test, an infection test, which may increase your HR by 2. I mean, or I'm sorry, reduce your HR by 2. So let's say you had marginal success on a serious stab and it's an H5, and then it gets infected. Now it becomes an H3, and then on the next day you roll again and maybe it becomes an H1, and then it says infection, patient is dead at HR0. So you could die in 3 days if it becomes infected, right? Because hypothetically, that's a lot of critical failures, but still, boom, boom, boom. Now, if you have critical success, you might be able to fight off the infection and your healing rate goes up by 2. Where is this in D&D? Okay, shock recovery. Okay, that's per watch is what I'll call that. A watch is an amount of time that a game master can keep track of what's going on in the world. And 4 hours, you just make a shock recovery roll. And if you go back up, you can see, okay, where's shock? Shock. Test HR by endurance once per watch. Shock abates at HR6. Patient is dead at H0. Because when I received my second wound and it became a 5, I rolled to see if I succumbed to shock. I passed out. Where shock is treated as special separate injury. If a patient is in shock, enter the word shock along with a healing rate of 5. Okay, you see, it answers my question. So it starts at H5. And then every 4 hours, it can go up or down. And if it gets reduced to it has no injury levels, roll percentile every 4 hours on the shock recovery table. The target level is HR times endurance, right? Plus half the physician who is attending you. The patient recovers from shock at H6 and dies at H0. So after one successful roll, you could wake up. So after 4 hours, you could theoretically wake up. Or you could, like if you don't have an attending physician, like you're by yourself in a dungeon and you get knocked out, you might die of shock. Okay. Healing table, 5-day roll. Well, we pretty much already went over that, but for some reason, non-Sindarin characters receive 1 healing rate every 5 days for an uninfected injury. Sindarins, or elves, receive 2 healing rolls. You would think that dwarves would, I mean, in my thought process would be that dwarves would receive bonus healing, but they don't. Elves do. Okay. And healing rolls assume a character gets 12 hours of rest per day. Yeah, an open wound is a grievous, blunt, serious or grievous burn, or any cut or stab. So my guy would have an open wound on his neck. A bandaged or stitched wound is still an open wound. So there's still a possibility for infection, even if it's treated. Okay, we're not talking about blood regeneration, even though you have to have blood loss to get blood regeneration, right? Yeah, it's a healing rate is always H6. Okay, infection healing table. It's a daily roll. We already talked about it. Open wounds can become infected during the healing routine. If a wound does become infected, write infected adjacent. Okay, and there's a checkbox on the character sheet. That wound on the combat. Once a wound is infected, little can be done except to rely on fate. The target level of the infection is that, remember, and once you get to 0, you're dead. Normal, okay. The infection is defeated when the wound reaches HR6. Okay, normal healing rules every 5 days, then resume at the HR6 healing rate. So, that tells me, or that implies, that once it becomes infected, it stops healing until the infection is defeated. Okay, infection reality. Historically, it was more common to die of infected wounds than die outright in battle. The chance of infection in these rules is less than historically justified for playability purposes. Infection may be combated by magic, miracles, amputation, or medicine. And look at that. Sindarin are immune to infection. That's some bullshit. Elves are bullshit. Okay, sorry. Can they fly too? Okay. All right. So that's your normal healing rules. Okay, we're going to talk about religion and clerics here in just a second. That's your normal healing rules. When you get taken out and you get a roll every 5 days for your healing. If it's an open wound, you have to test on infection, and then if it becomes infected, yeah, it's horrible, right? It's just horrible. But it's faster than reality. So if you take a human today and you cut him with a sword, and it's a pretty serious wound, and you take him to the hospital, they're going to stitch him up and fill him full of drugs. He's probably not going to get infected because, he's going to be in the hospital and they're going to have antibiotics and stuff, which you don't have in the Middle Ages. And how long do you think he's going to be in the hospital with a giant cut? Maybe a couple of days. They'll send him home and tell him to stay, inactive and just relax while the wound heals, and then he'll have to come back. How long before the stitches come out? Right? When my toe was amputated and they stitched me up, it was like a month. I think it was pretty long before they took the stitches out. It was bandaged up that entire time, and I had to wheel around in a wheelchair for a long time. Might not have been a month, might have been a couple of weeks, but still, that's a long time. And that's with today's modern medicine. You can just imagine what it would be in the Middle Ages. Okay, so now let's talk about potions. Okay, potions. Potions, there's a few generic potions that the game system has. I'm sure a DM can come up with his own potions, and I plan to do it. But they have this one here, it's called the healing potion, right? Which, you're familiar with. You drink it, you're healed, right? You drink it, you get some hit points back, boom, you're back and ready to go. No. Take a look at this. A patient who eats the leaves and seeds will fall into a deep sleep for 1 to 2 days, right? 20 to 50 hours. While asleep, the patient received 20-point bonus to all healing rolls. Well, guess what? I don't make healing rolls in the first 2 days. The patient wakes up with a voracious appetite because 10% of the patient's body mass was burned up by the potion, and it's widely used by the Church of Peony. Now, I can see drinking that right before the 5-day period and then getting a big, huge bonus of, but it says 20-point bonus. It doesn't say, it doesn't say 20% like it does right in the next line, 10%, and everything's done in percentages, but that says point bonus. So I have an interpretation that I'm going to change my healing potions to. I'm not going to use this healing potion right here anyway. Well, this healing potion will still exist, but I'm going to create my own healing potions, and that's has nothing to do with the rules. But what I plan to do is just I'm going to kind of base it on the spells that are able to be cast, and where it immediately removes one wound, or one, maybe not a wound, but maybe a immediately removes one healing level or wound, injury level, right? Or maybe 2 injury levels or 20 injury levels or something. We'll figure it out. Okay, but you can see here that this healing potion is not that good. I mean, it's good, but it's not. Yeah, they have anesthetic and disinfectant, right? Reduce the pain of minor wounds for 4 hours, a serious wound for 2 hours, a grievous wound for 1 hour. That just means you're not screaming because of the pain. The chance for a wound becoming infected is halved. After effects include numbness and lethargy, which I believe means you become sleepy, but in this case they just gave you a D6 fatigue levels. And then it says a high incident. Okay, there's tables you can roll on for treasure and stuff like that. And this is basically saying that healing potions are super popular on the chart, and that's done on purpose. But that's still not gonna. I don't know. There's this 20-point bonus kind of throws me off. I don't think it's worded rightly. I think it should say it. I mean, if it was a skill level modifier throughout the entire rest of the rules, it basically breaks it down in detail, saying plus 20 to your EML of the physician treating you. It doesn't say that. It says 20-point bonus. So I'm going to have to figure out what that really means. Okay, and then let's talk about clerics here. Right, so let's talk about Harnmaster religion, right? So this is the pantheon in Harn. We're not getting into all that. That's part of the religion video that I want to do. But there are some evil gods, and then there's goddesses of wealth that probably will not have any healing spells, right? But if you come down to Larani, right? So the Lady of Paladins, goddess of chivalry and battle, she does have a healing prayer or healing invocation. So, as you would expect from a paladin, right? And then there's Peony, which is the gentle goddess of agriculture and healing. Now, battle lust, maybe. Knowledge, nope. Benign god of mystery, nope. Morgoth, master of chaos and evil, nope. Creator of it, maybe he'll have healing. I don't know. I don't know what the other ones have, but Larani and Peony are both gods worshipped in Caldor, which is where I'm running my campaign. So I'm not going to get into all of the everything, right? But you have something called invocations, which I like to think of them as spells, because that's from D&D, but they're not really. They're the priest praying, touching you, you know, calling upon his deity to heal you, kind of like Lancelot, calling on his his faith to heal you. Okay, right. So let's go to Peony. Oh, wait. Nope, there's Lorani. Let's talk about her real quick. Um, the invocations or convocations have levels next to them, right? Um, there is a level 4 Lorani, which is pretty high. Bandage. Here it is. Oh, it's level 3. Okay, Lorani, level 3. Bandage of Saint Pereline. Okay, let's talk about clerics real quick. There is a time requirement to perform this ritual. That is it. Well, there's also a range, I suppose you could call it a limitation, but there's no other requirement. If you are a Lorani worshiper and you know the bandage of Saint Pereline, you can use it over and over and over again. You do not have like spell slots. You don't have mana points. You don't have to expend piety. You just do it, right? I mean, it takes a lot to learn, but as a new character, a new cleric, you get to choose some additional spells. And if you wanted to, you could pick this. I assume that not every spell is known by every cleric, right? So, but in a temple, you're not going to have just one cleric. You're going to have a bunch of clerics, right? And so one of them might be skilled in this ability, and they would be able to perform it over and over and over again. Now, it might be fatiguing or taxing to them in some way, which I'm going to make because I don't like the fact that our clerics in this game have unlimited power. I think it should be limited by either piety points or by fatigue levels or by some kind of faith or something. I don't know how I want to do it. Okay, but either way, in the way the rules are written, we'll call that raw rules as written. The time it takes to cast is 15 seconds minus your RSI, which is your ritual skill index. The ritual skill index is 10% of your ritual skill. So let's say you've got a 70 in your ritual skill. That means you're really good. You're probably a priest. Then you would subtract 7 from that. So it would only take, well, if I subtract 7, it would take 8 seconds to cast Bandage of Saint Pereline. As long as it's under 10, it could be done in one round. So, with a marginal success, okay, with a critical failure, critical success, marginal success, With a marginal failure, which is not listed on any of these as far as I know, it just means it fails. No other effects. But if it's a critical success, heal the designated wound completely in 1 day. Okay, so let's say marginal success stops blood loss and heals 1 injury level from any designated wound touched by the invoker. So I've got that neck wound. I touch it, boom, he heals 1 level. Next round, I touch him again, cast the same invocation, heal another level, heal another level, heal another level. So after 5 rounds, I could be completely healed, is what this is telling me, which is if I make marginal success rolls. Now, if I do a critical failure, I automatically make it infected. Yikes. But a critical success means it's completely healed in 1 day. So, like, let's say I do a critical success, heals the designated wound completely in 1 day. That's not fast enough. I do it again. And then I get a marginal success, marginal success, marginal success. So something about this doesn't make sense to me unless I'm only allowed to do it once. It says 1 use. Like instantaneous, 1 situation, 1 use. I'm not sure about that. I'm going to have to look that up. But we're not really talking about that right now. What I'm trying to say is, it seems like you could be, with the bandage of St. Peroline, you could be healed in 1 day completely from 1 wound. Right? Right. Okay, now let's look at Peony, because that's actually the healing god, or goddess. Peony right here. Okay, Peony spells. Ooh, I said spell. Okay. Just a couple of different ones, if I remember right. Healing of Gorla. Okay, so this is one that's 4. There must be one that's a little bit lower. Here we go. Tirala's Cure. That's a 3. That's the same rank as the Lorani one. But this one says duration, instant healing rolls. Helps overcome wounds with immediate healing rolls. So this is also 15 minus RSI in minutes, not seconds. So with the same RSI of 7, that brings it down to an 8-minute cast, which means it's not going to happen over and over and over. Well, it will happen over and over and over. It'll just be a longer amount of time. With a marginal success, you get 5 healing rolls. We already know what that does. And with a critical success, you get 10 healing rolls. Now, to me, that seems reasonable, right? You're improving the healing rate of the wounded character, and they just get to roll a multiple amounts of healing rolls, which, if it was a 50%, which is probably not, it's probably going to be, it's going to wind up being, well, if you're a bad healer, or bad, well, first of all, the priest should also be the attending physician, if you want to call it that. And if it's but let's just say that you're doing it yourself, you're probably looking at about maybe 50%. So half of these rolls are going to be successful. Okay, with 3 rolls, and if I have a H6 with like a 10 endurance, I'm just averaging. So you're looking at maybe succeeding with maybe 2 of them. So reducing the healing by 2. but with critical success, depending on if you get a critical success. But either way, what I'm trying to say is after about 8 minutes of praying and meditating, this character is going to heal 2 levels of a wound. And then you just do it again. You just heal and pray and heal and pray and just hover over the person, and divine light shining down. But if you look up here, we have Peony's Aid. You got stops blood loss, critical success, heals the designated wound completely in 1 day. Okay, so if you're looking at a higher ranking spell, it has a potential to get infected. This has nothing to do with that. But it does completely heal in 1 day. Where this is just much better, right? This is a lot faster though. This is 15 seconds. Where this is 15 minutes. But then healing a Gorlon regenerates. So, if you lose a leg or an organ, you can get it back. All right, so that was my brief understanding of the way healing is. Just to summarize before we end the video, Harn healing is without magic. Natural healing is very slow. It could be 5 days for a 1, 10 days for a 2, 15 days for a 3, maybe more based on your success or failure rate on your healing rolls, and if you're being attended or if you had it treated. So it's a lot like reality. And then there's magical healing, which could theoretically heal you in 1 day with the right prayers from your cleric. And then there's healing potions, which speed up your healing, but not like they should. What I think I'm going to do is make a healing potion, give you some free healing rolls. Doesn't make it automatic, but it does mean you get to roll right away. A lot like that one cleric spell from Peony. Other than that, so it would behoove a party to have, it would behoove them to have either a knight. If they're all knights, it would behoove them to maybe be a part of a fighting order from Lorani, where they can get some invocations, or have a cleric in the party that can perform some of these rituals. Otherwise, they're going to be reliant on potions, which in my game, I don't mind that. I'm going to have healing potions readily available and abundant, but it's still going to give you healing rolls, and you'll still need to treat the wound. And if you don't have potions and you don't have a cleric, you're going to have to skedaddle and get back to safety, where you can convalesce for a week or longer. What that is going to do in a campaign of Harn, it's going to progress time faster. But just think of a game where you and your friends are playing, and one of the guys is brave. That's the word I'm going to use. And he charges into battle with a monster, and there's a deadly fight going back and forth, and he wins, but he doesn't come across scot-free. He comes with a pretty serious injury. The players will probably treat his wound immediately, and then bring him back to civilization, right? And then in civilization, you guys might have a hotel room, or you might take him to a temple of peony, or you might, I say hotel when I, an inn, or you might have your own keep or whatever with your own uh, resident, what do they call them, surgeon or whatever, physician. And then your friend who went in and fought is now convalescing for 10 plus days. What does the rest of the party do? Are they gonna go adventuring? Are they going to, just mill about in town for 10 days? Are they going to sit beside him, and hold his hand while he convalesces or takes turns helping him? Now, he doesn't have to stay in bed. He can get up and wander around, but he can't do anything physical, because you don't want to tear the wound open again. What do they say? Aggravate the wound. So, while he's convalescing, that's going to put a big crimp on the players. But then again, this is not a game, or I don't envision Harn as a game of, okay, we go fight these orcs, now we go fight these goblins, let's go get this hippogriff, let's take on these bandits over here, all happening overnight. It's a very focused, encounter. Like, you fight a monster, you either win or lose, and then that encounter is over. You go back, you heal, you rest, and then in the following month or 2 months later, you go fight another monster, or you just do political intrigue inside the castle, or it's a little bit more, I don't know, down to earth. It seems like you can't just be, you're not D&D characters. You're not superheroes, right? So it's going to take a little bit of a mind adjustment to play a game like that. So if you're interested in that kind of game, Harn will be for you. But if you want all your players to be babied and give them hit points where they can just sleep it off every day, then play D&D. But I still want to have healing a little bit faster than raw. Rules as written. I think raw is just a little bit too punishing for the players. So I'm going to adjust that just slightly. I've got to figure out how I'm going to do it, but I don't want to do that until I learn the rules completely through. All right, so in a future video, probably I don't know what our next video is going to be. I know that I still have to talk about magic. I have to talk about religions, and I want to talk about like mounted combat and stuff like that. So we didn't really hardly even talk about ranged combat either. But the next videos I'm going to have to think about a little bit more. Harn religion might be the next one, or maybe Harn magic. All right, well, thanks for coming out and checking this out. If you're interested in some fantasy miniatures or World War II or historicals in general, and fantasy, you should check out my eBay store on the screen right there. And I'd appreciate it. I also do commissions. If you've got an army that needs to be painted, let me know. I'll quote you a price. And you can go to my channel and or go to my store, and you can kind of see the quality of work that I already do. And catch you in the next video.